I'd like to dedicate my talk this morning to my teacher, Sojun Roshi, the old Buddha. You know, he died 3 years ago, as I'm sure you all know. And I wish that I had asked more of him, especially not practicing side by side with him for most of our relationship. And I really wish that I'd risked more with him when he was alive. I did more at the end of his life, for which I'm really grateful. You know, Sojun had the same regret about Suzuki Roshi, that he felt like he would be pestering him, which was the same way I felt about Sojun. But I also have to say that Sojun is present with me today in many ways more than he ever has been. And I feel so close to him. In the heart of the Dharma was always where we connected most deeply. He did not really understand my various neurotic aspects. Yeah, just didn't go there so much, but the more we were in tuned in the Dharma, the fuller that relationship was. So as I said, we're studying, we're in the practice period, and Greg and I are teaching a class on the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi, which you may be familiar with, one of the kind of foundational texts in Soto Zen. And the heart of that is expressed in the opening couplet. The teaching of thusness has been intimately communicated by Buddhas and ancestors. Now you have it, so keep it well. So this theme of suchness or thusness and of transmission of what we transmit are what I want to talk about today, but I'm not going to talk about the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi, except to say that that was the inspiration for this. So suchness or thusness is from the Sanskrit word tatata, which means thus. And another name for the Buddha is Tathagata, or the thus come one, or thus gone one. Could also say emptiness, or enlightenment, or true reality. So many names, so many words for what is truly beyond words. I've been reading Sojun Roshi's book that came out fairly recently called Seeing One Thing Through. And of course, I had to look up what he's had to say about suchness in the various forms. So I want to share something from the book. Sojun writes, there is the way of karma and the way of dharma. The way of karma is our ordinary dualistic life. The way of dharma is pursuing the way of liberation, which is sometimes called enlightenment. I like that word, but I don't like the way it's often expressed. For me, enlightenment means light, implying that someone who is on the path of liberation is expressing light. There are many different ways of expressing this. When we speak of Tao in the Dharma, in Buddhism, we think of liberation or enlightenment, or being a vehicle of light. So as I said, for 30 years, I've had a foot in both Vipassana and Zen, and Gil Fronsdal and Sojun Roshi have both been my teachers during this time. And about 10 years ago, Gil invited him to do a Vipassana retreat with him, for Sojun to do a Vipassana retreat with Gil. And it was the first time he'd ever done one, and he was completely delighted by everything. He was so interested. And on Vipassana retreats, you know, it's like sitting, walking, sitting, walking, sitting, but the walking periods are much longer. It's 45 minutes of sitting, 45 minutes of walking, And often on a Vipassana retreat, the yogis will go off and like go to the bathroom or do a little yoga or take a little break or get a cup of tea or something. It's flexible. It's not Zen for sure. And Sojun just walked into the kind of hall space immediately outside the retreat hall and did very slow kinhin. Everyone just goes at their own pace and in their own space. So he just did kinhin right outside the hall, back and forth for all 45 minutes, every single period. And it inspired so many people. So many people were doing it like every period. It's like, he's in his 80s. Maybe I could also do this. So he was just very quietly transmitting light, just by being completely himself. And during that retreat, there's often, I'm hearing the leaf blower outside. Can you hear me okay? Is that impacting? Okay, great. So Gil invited him to give the instruction for metta practice and love and kindness practice, which I don't think that I've ever heard Sojun teach per se, although apparently he was the person who brought the metta sutta or loving kindness practice to San Francisco Zen Center and included it as part of the liturgy. And he did it in very much his own way. He used the usual format of, bringing warm attention to oneself and to loved ones, people who are close to us, neutral people and difficult people. But instead of talking about loving kindness or sort of a mantra of may you be well, may you be peaceful, may you be at ease, he talked instead about sending love and light, or emanating love and light. And this was also so interesting for me because at Berkeley Zen Center, Sojun really did not often talk about love. And every so often, every few years, he'd give a talk and he'd start off and he'd be a little grumpy. Be like, people keep telling me that I never talk about love. Why don't you ever talk about love? He said, what do I ever talk about? Love, everything we're doing, everything in practice is love. And I think he just didn't want it to be confused with either sentimentality or sexuality. But yeah. So at the end of his instructions, he ended by extending love and light to the whole world. And he said, may you be filled with love. May you be filled with light. Let the ripples flow out in all directions from your center. May all beings be happy and live in safety. And then during the Q&A, someone asked him, okay, so when or how do you use this practice? Because I'm a little confused. How you have been teaching us to sit, which was pretty much shikantaza, didn't sound quite like this. And Sojun sat back for a second, kind of settled himself on his self. And he said, I always use this practice. It's the only practice I have. And the questioner said, you mean loving kindness? And he said, I don't call it loving kindness. I call it love and light. And of course, he meant love in the higher sense of the meaning. And he said, I just realized this is the only practice I do. Although I don't call it anything, I don't send out love so much. When I sit, I don't think about light, but I feel that light is being transmitted. We're all vehicles of light. We allow the light to pass through us and into the world. Everything is light. I sometimes think that waves of light are being emanated from my heart. That's just a natural mode of being. Just allow yourself to be a vehicle of light. And I think Sojun must have had a natural affinity for light, being a painter. He went on to say, we are all a vehicle for something: anger, hate, self-interest. We're like a transmitter. We receive, digest, and transmit. What are we broadcasting? He said, I think the purpose of Dharma and Sangha is harmony. How do we allow harmony to manifest? So this talk was recorded and it's on the Audio Dharma website. So I got to find it again after 10 years. I'd remembered it very accurately, but I wanted to listen to it again. So that's actually Sojun's words. So I think Sojun manifested this light so much in his life. And one of the times that I remember, also related to him being a painter, I'm sure, was at Berkeley Zen Center, and it was during a work period. And there was a project to varnish the windowsills at Berkeley Zen Center. And varnish is very particular. You know, you have to use the paintbrush just right, and you can't fuss with it. It dries very quickly. And Sojun was doing the varnish on these windowsills. And he was completely absorbed. He was in applying the varnish samadhi, completely present, and just so precise and just present, and in this loving way applying the varnish. And I just stopped and I just watched him for a while. And in his book, he also talks about being trained as a painter many, many years ago, as a house painter, and how you had to be very particular about how you did it, what you did, and how you did it. And another story about Sojun is that many years ago, when he was abbot of San Francisco Zen Center, someone had been asked to be, Victoria Austin, was asked to be Tenzo at City Center. And she wasn't so happy about it. And she went to talk to Sojun. And he said, okay, if you'll be Tenzo, I'll come. No, she said, I'll be Tenzo if you will come work with me in the kitchen. And he said, okay. So she became Tenzo. And one day he showed up and he said, what would you like me to do? And Victoria said, please chop onions. He said, okay. How big? And she said, medium chop. I said, okay, will you give me an example? So she chopped a piece the right size and set him up. It was an unhappy kitchen, I should say, which was why Victoria wasn't thrilled about the idea of coming in as Tenzo into a kitchen that was full of some strife, as kitchens can be. So he just came in and started chopping onions, and that was all he did. But it was like you dropped a point of calm into the middle of that kitchen, and the ripples of calm just extended outward from the center, and the kitchen became calm. The whole kitchen became calm. So these teachings and these stories have been particularly alive and meaningful for me lately, because there's a lot going on in our world these days. I mean, always has been, and it seems to be accelerating. A lot of change, uncertainty, greed, hate, and delusion taking new forms. So I think it's really worth talking about, pointing to the utility or the usefulness of suchness. Usually we say, oh, Zazen is good for nothing, which in one sense is absolutely true. And it's important not to try to make something out of it, because trying to grasp something is pretty much a surefire way of creating more suffering. But I think it's worth appreciating the value, not to hold on to it, not to turn into it, but to fully appreciate the value of our practice, of suchness, of goodness, and not take it for granted. The beneficial power of the capacity to just be profoundly present and connected supports us to not perpetuate harms, large or small, and to help others as well. To let go of our own anger moment by moment is to help others let go of their anger moment by moment, and to give our attention and energy to whatever is good moment by moment. So here in New Orleans, we are so fortunate to be able to stay with a member of the Sangha as guests in her home, which has just been delightful. And she is one of the top 5 capital defense lawyers in the country, defending death row defendants, post-capital, post-conviction. So they've been on death row for a while in Angola State Prison, which is a notorious, terrible prison in Louisiana. And on her refrigerator, so I get to see this every day, she'd made a little card for herself, and it says, "Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it." And that's from the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. Sojun quoted Suzuki Roshi in his book as saying, you just sit down, and then when you take a step, that step is the way, and then you take another step. The way is in the walking, not in the goal. You have to find yourself in each step. So thank you very much. And I think maybe we have time for some Q&A.
We do, and if other people don't mind, I'd like to jump in first and just ask if you could say more about the connection or the relationship between thusness or shikantaza and the love as Sojun expounded.
wish I could find the exact quote, but, well, okay, so I can give you one, because we've just been teaching this in the class. So there's a book called Cultivating the Empty Field. It's Hongshi's practice instructions, record of Hongshi. And Hongshi begins by saying, the field of boundless emptiness is what exists from the very beginning. You must purify, cure, grind down, or brush away all the tendencies you have fabricated into apparent habits. Then you can reside in the clear circle of brightness. So the boundless field of emptiness, suchness, whatever you want to call it, is what exists from the very beginning. And we have to realize that for ourselves. And the only thing that stands in the way is our karmic tendencies, our karmic conditioning. So that's the purify, cure, grind down, brush away, whatever, however you're letting go, that's the natural state. So naturally, love and suchness are not separate. Love is someone loving something. So it's how we manifest this. It's not just experiencing it, not just touch. I mean, it always is. Then we experience it for ourselves and we express it. And those are all tied together. So it's not like 1, 2, 3 in order. It's always happening. All three are always happening at once. And it's helpful to be able to see that. But for me, it's tremendously helpful to be able to see that and remember that my view of the world is not necessarily the only or best one, whether it's optimistic, pessimistic about myself or about others, but to keep remembering to step back and look at it from the point of view of the whole. Thanks for your question.
Peter, your mic is muted.
Yeah, Linda, Jane, and I are all part of the same Sangha, not just this Sangha, but we were all students of Mel. Mel is Sojun, by the way, and his book just came out this year, which I'm in the middle of reading also, very happily. Can you tell us any funny stories about Sojun?
Oh my God. Oh, my memory doesn't work so well when I'm putting it on the spot. Give me a second. Yes, a couple. Sojun loved food. Mel loved food. He delighted in it. And so the stories that are popping into my mind right now are about that. You're really not in Oryoki, formal eating in the Zendo is very, very formal. It's all in silence except the chanting. They bring the food around. You're not supposed to indicate what you want in the pot. But Sojun would peer into the pot and point, I want this bit or that bit. And people would often bring him tea, that during sashimi we'd have tea, and people would leave him like a chocolate chip cookie, and he'd say, "Can I have two?" So, yeah, I can't just. He was constantly funny. He mugged, he'd do these little things, and just he was so playful. It's still funny to me to see. He's such a playful person, and in the midst of presence and gravity, he didn't tell jokes. he just delighted in people so much that he kind of made other people funny. So thanks for asking.
Matt, go ahead. Yeah,
You're good.
there you go.
There.
Linda, thank you for the talk. Could you comment on the feeling of safety and connection with love,
Oh,
being loved, loving?
yes. I think it's I mean, just as human beings, as mammals, you know, the feeling of safety and love are so intimately connected just on such a basic neurological level. And when we feel safe, it's so easy to love. It's so easy to open up and be friendly and warm. And I think a lot of our practice is, for me, I'll speak for me because I'm definitely a fear type, and is learning not to be held back by what I'm experiencing in my body at the moment, and to widen my view beyond my own body mind and hold the other person or other people together with me. So it's less about me, and there's more space to feel safety in the broad sense. I mean, and then there's safety, you know, it's like when we look at what's happening in Gaza, you know, it's like the lack of safety is so immediate. And, you know, some of the stories that come out are about the profound love that continues to be expressed between people, you know, parents for their children, protecting them, and children going out looking for food to bring to their families. And, you know, there's so many ways to express love. And I think cultivating a broader sense of safety is really important. At least it's been very, very important to me, because my nervous system just goes wild very easily. And if I take it too seriously, then my world gets very small. And when I keep challenging that and opening, not like pushing myself, but just finding how to settle into my feet if I'm walking, or settle into my hara when I'm sitting, just makes all the difference. It's like, oh, I can move forward now. Yeah, rather than back into contraction, I can extend, I can move forward. Does that address?
Yeah. Thank you.
Jane? Muted?
Jane, you're muted.
Very much, Linda, for this awfully good talk. And I also always felt that Mel was very playful. So hearing the stories about him is very funny, and about the food especially, it was interesting. Anyway, your points about love and reaching out into the world and expressing the short poem in the Talmud was really good, really interesting. And I thank you very much for coming here and talking to us. I hope you'll be doing it again sometime not too far in the future.
Wonderful, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else have a question or comment for Linda? Linda, what is your Dharma name? You've been using Mel's Dharma name. What is yours?
Kodo Shinchi, eternal way, intimate ground.
Oh, Shinchi is intimate ground. Shinchi.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh,
That's nice.
oh.
I didn't get it when he first gave it to me. But after a while, I realized, oh yeah, he really got me to, to touch into that. My Dharma was being more intimate with myself and with others, and that's actually the ground. I mean, you could say the ground is anything, but that's my orientation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mel named me, um, forgetting the Japanese, but the translation is embracing Zen or hugging Zen. And years later, well, 15 maybe years later or something like that, I said, Mel, why did you name me that? He said, I don't know.
Totally. Okay, so I'll tell you a funny one about Mel. So I was in graduate school for for a long time, 5 years. I was getting my PhD in clinical psychology. I went straight through. So 5 years of coursework and a couple years of internship and a couple years of writing a dissertation. And I really struggled in many ways during that time. It was when I first knew Mel, and yeah, not a happy time in my life. And so there was physical stuff, mental stuff. Well, anyway, after I graduated and was working, and I was still not quite back on my feet, stability wise, I had Dokusan with Mel one day in the little Dokusan hut in the back of Berkeley Zen Center. And he said, "You still don't seem to be very happy. Have you thought about doing something else? Maybe you could be a waitress." He was serious. So I spent about a week trying to figure out what he was really trying to say to me. Then I decided he was just off base. But clearly pointing toward something more simple. And a couple of years later, I did go off to Tassajara, which was considerably more simple, and I became much happier.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And Linda?